Hey, John.
What up, guys? How are you?
JK, what's going on?
We only saw one drive, but it was a pretty nice drive. Your first impressions of Jayden?
Hey, get that gold jacket, man. First of all, you always have to take into account. Okay, the Jets aren't playing their defensive stars. I get it. The things I like about him, though, are things that he's been showing, right? So, the first pass he threw a little screen pass, a little bit over anxious on it, etc. But the 42-yard pass was really, really nice. And I think it kind of encompassed a lot of what he offers. And, changing the play at the line. I really like how he doesn't get over anxious. He holds the safety. The safety who's dropping into like a deep middle is turning the other way because of how Daniels is where he's looking, et cetera. So that it opens up the outside for De'Ami Brown. Then he drops in a dime. And I also think that, part of a lot of what he offers is that big play ability. And there have been times that not every quarterback, I think, throws that play because it's not like De'Ami's just wide open or anything like that. You got to give your guy a chance. And I think he understands you have to give your guys a chance. And that's what he does. And so I think that's what he offers. And then obviously the touchdown, we know he can run. So I think that was good. But what I also like too is from all the quarterbacks too, I think this bodes well, but you don't see a lot of indecision out there. And I think that's something you've seen throughout the summer as well. So, you don't want to go overboard on one series, but I do think it was a good showing for him, and it's why. You don't change that play if you're not confident and comfortable in what you're doing. And I don't want to make this the world's greatest audible, but it's one of the things that we have to go by, and I do think it highlights a part of certainly some of what he offers.
Just want to get your prediction. Doesn't mean anything, but we were debating last week how many runs we think they're going to have designed for Jayden Daniels per game. My guess was 4 or more. What do you think?
I think it would. I don't know. I would probably say just around 4. That would be about right. Because I don't know that you're going to want to have. I think you want to do it because clearly it helps regulate the defense. We've seen that here in the past. And, I always go back to even when Robert was here and you do those zone reads, their feeling was, and you go back and watch them, is that it protected the quarterback more. Where the quarterbacks got hurt and where Robert would get hurt is on the scramble. So, I think you can do that. And I do think probably around there, I think that's a good number. But I don't know that you're going to want – I think the good thing for him is I don't think you have to rely on that with him. You know what I mean? So I think because he's a good passer coming out of college, that you can do different things with him. But it is the other thing too, and this goes back to Kingsbury, what you saw in that game too, even in Jayden's one series, is I think there's an understanding of what they're operating with and not putting him back there and having to, go 1, 2, 3 through your progressions. And, you know what I mean? Like you don't have your starting tackles in there. So I think, he did a good job, I think, of protecting him while also giving them freedom to make a play. And, but I think part of protecting him will be running some of those zone reads because it opens it up for others and, regulates the D.
I love the up-tempo, no-huddle stuff that they did.
Yeah.
I feel like half of it was no huddle, which I love, which also shows that Jayden has a full grasp of the offense, right? He's not struggling to get guys in position and to execute that. I thought that was very exciting. What is your best expectation for the next game? I want to talk about more guys on this one, but for Jayden, do you think he'd play as much as a half in the next game, or is that too much?
I don't know. I think it's going to depend on what's the O-line situation like.
Right.
So, I think there's, then how much does he – I would expect him going into the preseason, I would have expected him to play like 1 or 2 series in the first one and then maybe, a good quarter or so more in the second one. But I don't know that that's still going to be the case. I think I'd say let's see how it goes through that game or through the joint practice. For sure. But I think that's a good point too that you bring up with the no huddle, the hurry up. They've done that a lot in practice, and when you're doing that, you're not necessarily dipping into every play in your playbook, but you do have to have a good level of comfort with the playbook. And I think that's the other thing. I'm glad you brought that up because that's another thing that he certainly has as well. But let's see what happens through the joint practice, how much he works there, what the O-line situation is like, et cetera.
What are you hearing on the injuries to the starters on the O-line?
So with Brandon Coleman and Dan Quinn said after the game, with the pec/shoulder, he called them day to day, then week to week. So I think it's just going to be a wait and see. With Andrew Wiley, he's got that tightness. Not sure exactly where, but he's got the tightness. And I talked to him. I don't know what's today, Monday, probably last Sunday, I think it was. And at that time, he felt like he would be back out by the end of last week, essentially, right? So I would think that he's very soon. He's been dressing and he's out there in pads. He just hasn't been doing full teamwork. So I would think soon. And Lucas, he missed for personal reasons, so I would think he'd be back pretty soon.
John, let's talk about some of the others, especially the skill position guys on offense. I thought Sinnott obviously flashed. I mean, a guy looked like friggin' Gronkowski at one point. I was so excited to see that. I thought Brian Robinson, who I like him, he's fine, whatever, but I thought he looked good, which is kind of exciting. And then Diame. I mean, to be honest with you, Diame needs a performance like that, and I thought he made a couple plays, which was good for him.
Diame has one thing that coaches love, which is speed. And so, and you have a coach that wants to get the ball down the field and a quarterback who can get the ball down the field. That's going to give guys like De'Ami Brown a shot. And he's been working when you're watching them, like primarily the first three receivers have been obviously Terry, then Dotson, and De'Ami when they're working in groups and stuff.
Zacchaeus also looked good. Right.
Zacchaeus also looks good. He's he's a slot guy, and I think he's got some quickness. He had a couple nice punt returns, and one thing on the punt returns, like you'd like to see him catch the ball a little bit smoother, but he can do something with it after he gets it. And so I think that, and that's what we've seen throughout camp as well. So like to be honest, like those four have been guys. I think Tremaine has made plays in camp, and he had a nice grab over the middle the other night. McCaffrey's still kind of coming along. I think there's some things that he can do. I think he can play physical. I think he's still adjusting to, you're not seeing like a lot of these big plays from him yet. And so, but I think, he's only been playing receiver for 2 years. And it's the first time, you know what I mean? So there's still an adjustment period for him where you're doing it at the college level and getting used to that. Now you got to do it at this level. So that, and there are definitely things you can see, get some stuff quick underneath. But so I think, we'll see how he comes along. But Sinnott, that's what he offers. What we saw the other night is exactly what he's shown in college. And then he also offers the versatility of being able to block and do things from multiple spots. And that's one of the things they like about him. But the run after the catch is what we saw the other night was what he showed in college, that ability. I mean, that one, it was, I think a guy hits him at the 46, drags him for a few yards, another guy jumps in, a couple other guys jump in, and he still gets down to the 21. Like, that's the kind of stuff that how a stadium reacts to those kind of runs. Like, you have guys, the other thing is, like, if you want to be a physical team, you get guys like that who are physical. And I think that's what Sandra still, smaller guy, but he plays bigger than he is, right? So, Frankie Louvu, I mean, guys like that, you want to play it a certain way, you get guys like that.
Talking to John Keim, covers the Commanders for ESPN.com. All right. Anything jump out at you on the defensive side of the ball?
I just brought up two of them, Louvu but like Louvu in practice, again, you see the speed and you see the physical, and you saw how he attacks guys. And I think he's going to be a fun one to watch. And Samra still, again, like you're trying to kind of dive into a couple plays to see, but what he showed, there was one play where, it's just like, I like his ability to get to the ball, and and he gets there and he plays to me bigger than he is. So that was good. But the tackles aren't in there. I think Jamin Davis played the run really well and played with a lot of power.
Mm-hmm.
The quickness with his hands and the pads. I think he kind of stunned the tackle the first time he played against them. Still developing as a pass rusher, but again, I go back to like with Diami. Coaches are always reluctant to get rid of or to give up on, I should say, size and speed, and Davis has that. So I think they're going to be very patient with how he comes along there if he shows moments like that. So, I think you have to wonder, like, where's the corner situation going to go? Is Emmanuel Forbes going to have to play? I think he's going to have to play better for them. So I think that's something that you have to pay attention to over the next few preseason games.
Do you think we're going to see some of those defensive starters more in the Miami game?
Probably, I would think so.
Yeah.
But again, I think it goes back to how much they work in the joint practice to see how much they play. And I don't, it's funny because with Dan Quinn, because you haven't covered them for a preseason, you don't always know what's their philosophy with playing certain guys. And I know going into the last game, it was like if guys worked a lot during the joint practice on Thursday, they weren't going to play much on Saturday. So if that holds true, then we'll see. But I would think that some of those guys are going to play more, especially the young guys. Like, you're going to want to get those guys some more reps, I would think. So, and then also, like, to be honest, like, again, I brought up Forbes, the guys like that. Like, if you want to, depending on what you want to see from them and how much more you need to see from them, then that could take into account as well. But I don't know how much they will play yet.
Yeah.
Who are some of the guys that have been around for a few years that really got to watch their back? I think we've talked about him with you a couple times. Fedarian Matthews got to be one of those guys, right?
Yes. Yeah. And he had a couple nice plays the other night, and then, other times where it's like, all right, you obviously have to do better here. But he had a couple nice. I think he had one stop. I can't remember, it was for no gain or something like that in the hole. A nice play, getting off a double team. So, but yes, I think he's a guy that you have to say, like, these guys don't care where you were drafted before this year. It's irrelevant to them. So if you haven't shown a whole lot, then yes, I think you're a guy who needs to show a whole lot. And I think I would put Mathis in that category for sure.
Getting back to the offense, Kingsbury obviously has a really good reputation. In college, he threw the ball all the time, but once he got to the NFL, he started to run the ball. He was more balanced. Bieniemy was a disaster last year, and he also didn't have great talent. But how much of a plus is Kingsbury, just based on what you're seeing in practice, what you saw on Saturday, who guys that you're talking to, the players you're talking to? How much of a plus is he going to be, in your opinion?
I think a big plus. Now, the part of the thing last year too is they gave Bieniemy too much freedom to do whatever he was going to do, right? And so there wasn't. Well, I think here there was much more of a vision of how, not just what Kingsbury wants to do, but what does Dan Quinn want to see from his offense and the style, right? I don't think you're going to see, them dropping back 70% of the time and without Quinn getting over there and saying, we're not doing this, right? And not that, you know what I mean? I just think just because it's like, that's not who you want to be. So I think you don't bring him on here unless you have that shared vision. So I think it will be, like I said the other night, I felt like there are a couple things. One, you don't see the indecision by the quarterbacks. I mean, despite, even on my podcast, I'm talking about the O-line, but you didn't see them under siege too much, right? It wasn't like there were plays that were, where the line didn't do a good job, but the ball's getting out. And so it lessens the mistakes. It helps others look better. And that comes from quarterbacks being comfortable with what they're being asked to do. So, I think, it's been a good change. I want to see how it plays out, but so far it's been a good change for sure. I mean, guys certainly seem happy, but I think when you talk to guys too, like, they're happy for multiple reasons. I mean, so a lot of that optimism it comes from number 5.
Right.
I mean, that's where, And I think what I do think with Kingsbury is he knows how to work with young quarterbacks. And again, I felt like he did a good job with how he called the game the other night to put them in a spot where you're not being asked to, go 1, 2, 3, 4 with your reads. Not that they can't do it, but that if you're not sure how things are going to hold up, and I'm not saying this is why he did it, but I think that's what you see. They were putting him in favorable spots, right? And so I think that goes back to the offensive coordinator. So that's a good thing. But I do think, like I said, the biggest reason I think they have for optimism is because of what they see from number 5, not just on the practice field, but away from it.
Always good to hear from you,
Yep.
John. We'll talk to you soon.
All right, guys.